Heavy-hitting Four Corners investigation into the UFC. You're with ABC News. It's 9 a.m. Eastern and 7 a.m. in the West. And leading our bulletin this hour, we are live to our America's editor, John Lyons, in the United States, where National Guard troops have been mobilised in Los Angeles on the orders of President Donald Trump. This follows ongoing violent clashes and arrests over immigration raids. President Trump has declared he won't allow the country to be torn apart, but critics are accusing him of manufacturing a crisis. Also ahead and back home, a rescue operation is underway after dozens of drivers became trapped at Victoria's Mount Hotham and endured a night of freezing conditions. Meanwhile, in New South Wales, 2 bushwalkers have been rescued in Kosciuszko National Park after they became stranded. Also ahead, built on pain, not pay. A heavy-hitting Four Corners investigation into the UFC exposes the harsh reality behind the business. Former fighters describe a culture of exploitation, secrecy and lasting damage of the money-making machine. The details on that coming up. The King's birthday honours. More than 800 Australians are being recognised for their service, achievements and creativity. Baz Luhrmann and Scott Morrison are among those on the list. And from the King's honours to the new King of Clay, Carlos Alcaraz rallies from 2 sets down and saves 3 match points to win against Yannick Sinner in the longest ever French Open final. It's Monday the 9th of May. I'm Gemma Veness from the land of the Darug people in Parramatta in Western Sydney. This is ABC News Mornings. Tensions are high in Los Angeles after 2,000 National Guard troops were deployed to quell protests sparked by immigration raids. Now, it is a move that has put LA squarely at the centre of the Trump administration's controversial immigration crackdown. The White House claiming the protests are an insurrection against the US. Troops have been stationed across various locations, dressed in tactical gear and holding firearms in front of armoured vehicles. The National Guard, a military-trained special operations unit, is rarely deployed in the US, particularly without the support of the state governor. California's Governor Gavin Newsom has accused the president of purposefully exacerbating the situation. Donald Trump is standing firm.
Well, we're going to have troops everywhere. We're not going to let this happen to our country. We're not going to let our country be torn apart like it was under Biden. I mean, if we see danger to our country and to our citizens, we'll be very, very strong in terms of law and order. It's about law and order.
Our America's editor, John Lyons, joins me now. John, what's the latest in terms of this deployment?
Well, Gemma, the latest is that with these 2,000 National Guard have gone into Los Angeles, the Secretary of Defence in the US, Pete Hegseth, has said that there is a large number of Marines who are at a base in Los Angeles who the administration will deploy if need be. It's concerning and worrying because of the show of strength. There have been some sporadic clashes. The crowds are building up. And I think the real danger will be during the night is 1992. I covered some race riots in Los Angeles where the National Guard was brought in on that occasion as well. And the nighttime tends to be worse than the daytime. There have been tear gas fired by some of the authorities, the officers, as well as rubber bullets. Now, what makes this very difficult and, in my view, dangerous is because usually the National Guard are used in America when they're brought in at the request of a governor. If there's something like a natural disaster or massive civil unrest, the governor will request of the president that the National Guard comes in. The National Guard are an unusual element within the US military. We don't really have anything like them in Australia. Now, what's different on this occasion is the governor actually not only has not requested them, but has actually said, I don't want them. Gavin Newsom, the governor, has said that he thinks it's inflammatory. The mayor of Los Angeles says she thinks it's inflammatory. And to give you an idea of the hostility here, President Trump routinely mocks the governor of California, Gavin Newsom, who is a Democrat. Instead of calling him Gavin Newsom, calls him Gavin Newscum. And so that's not a very good basis on which to try to de-escalate what is a gathering situation.
And with that tension playing out, John, how are Americans reacting to that?
Well, America, as we know, it's a deeply divided, a deeply polarised country at the moment. We've seen that in the election results. The Trump supporters, this is the single most popular policy of Donald Trump. He's been under some pressure in terms of his economic policy, his tariffs, the cutting, Elon Musk's slashing of some of the government expenditures, some veterans who voted for Donald Trump have lost their jobs. However, this issue of so-called border control and immigration, the deportation, it's extremely supported and popular amongst the Donald Trump supporters. And so they will be looking at those images of the build-up of force, which many people around the world might be extremely concerned about. And a lot of the Trump supporters will look at that and think, finally, a president who's tough on law and order. And the president in the last few hours has been repeatedly using that phrase, I'm about law and order, this is about law and order. And so it's a dangerous situation, and I can't quite see at the moment who's going to de-escalate it.
And John, what have we seen so far under this crackdown and the further plans that Donald Trump has?
Well, what's prompted this latest clash in the streets has been the government, their immigration officers have been going around Los Angeles in particular and trying to detain, arrest and then to deport some illegal immigrants. Los Angeles has a very high Latino population, as we know, and some of the targets of the illegal immigration in the latest round, the last 2 or 3 days, have been from the Latino community in Los Angeles. And so that is what's prompted this. However, the initial protests against this, there were some protesters gathered outside the immigration officers, their main office, their headquarters in Los Angeles. From what I could see, there was no violence. This appears to be Donald Trump trying to make a stamp, to make a public statement that this is my policy. You will see this in the street. This is emblematic of what I believe, the deportation, and hence the rhetoric of the administration of Donald Trump and Peter Hegseth about putting more and more people in there. And you'll see it even in the deep divided media here. You'll have CNN talking about the lack of due process and civil liberties and the legality of all of this and the issue of the state governor not wanting it. And then on the other side, you'll see Fox News essentially saying that this is finally a much needed crackdown on some rabble, on mobs and rabble.
We're seeing these live pictures play out at the moment out of LA, John. But in terms of, who is being caught up in this, would you say that there's broad support for convicted criminals to be deported under this, but that's where it ends, with so many others are being caught up in this crackdown?
I think what's happening at the moment in Los Angeles is you have the people who are directly involved in this, of course, the friends, the relatives of many of those allegedly illegal migrants. But what you're also seeing is that there's others who are joining this and wanting to turn it into a general anti-Trump demonstration. Now, if those crowds gather, it only takes one person, and I saw this in 1992 in Los Angeles, it only takes 1 or 2 people in the crowd to throw a rock or to do something, and then suddenly the tear gas starts coming the other direction, people start running all over the place, it becomes chaotic, and as night falls in Los Angeles, then that's when it becomes, I think, quite dangerous. So hopefully this situation will be de-escalated, but night comes in about 2 or 3 hours in Los Angeles. And so I think that, hopefully it will be a peaceful night, but certainly when you look at those pictures, it's very concerning.
Our America's editor, John Lyons, coming to us there live. Thank you for that. Well, emergency services in Victoria and New South Wales have carried out a series of rescues over the long weekend after heavy snow left them stuck inside their cars. Reporter Max Tillman joins us now from Sydney. Max, what can you tell us about these rescues?
Good morning, Gemma. Well, 6 people remain trapped in their vehicles in the Victorian Alpine region as SES crews continue a major rescue operation at Mount Hotham. We know at about 10:30 on Saturday evening, up to 20 people became trapped in their vehicles in what the SES described as really treacherous conditions. The Victorian Alpine region has seen over 60 centimetres of snow over the last week. We know over the weekend 13 people were successfully removed from their vehicles. The SES have made very clear that those who remain trapped in their vehicles have ready access to food and water and are relatively protected from the elements. But to give you an indication of how serious these conditions are, there were specialist alpine rescue crews who were called in to help, and they needed to use snowmobiles to actually access these people. On the other side of the border here in New South Wales, 2 hikers in the Kosciuszko National Park got themselves into trouble on Saturday evening and required rescuing by SES crews. They're a 31-year-old man and a 28-year-old woman. More broadly across New South Wales, we are seeing snowfalls in the New South Wales Alpine region as well as in the Central West around Oberon and Orange, although the Bureau is saying that their predictions the predictions may not end up eventuating in terms of the snowfall, although it is important to mention that they're predicting snow below 800 metres and temperatures hovering around -1 degrees. But more importantly, emergency services more broadly are telling people to check conditions before travelling as snow season starts.
Max Tillman reporting. Thank you. Israel is warning its military will take whatever measures are necessary to prevent a boat carrying pro-Palestinian activists and humanitarian aid from reaching Gaza. The country's defence minister issued the ominous warning to the 12-member crew, which includes climate protester Greta Thunberg. He says they should turn back and that Israel will act against any attempt to breach its blockade. Middle East correspondent Matthew Doran reports from Jerusalem.
A week ago, the Freedom Flotilla and its ship, the Madeleine, set sail from Sicily bound for Gaza, carrying some aid for the war-ravaged strip. It's crewed by a group of humanitarian campaigners, including Greta Thunberg, who want to break Israel's aid blockade of Gaza by sea as the military continues to restrict aid entering the territory by land. And as the ship edges closer, the rhetoric from the Israeli government is sharpening. The country's defence minister, Israel Katz, taking to social media to issue an ominous warning. Israel Katz said he had instructed the IDF to prevent the, quote, Madeleine hate flotilla from reaching Gaza and to take whatever measures necessary to stop the ship, saying to the anti-Semitic Greta and her fellow Hamas propaganda spokespeople that they should turn back because they will not reach Gaza. Greta Thunberg has previously rejected allegations she's anti-Semitic and returned serve on Instagram, insisting the campaign is not about the ship or the crew, saying it's about the genocide, blockade and systematic oppression of Palestinians. Israel has denied allegations of genocide in the strip. As the ship sailed off the coast of Egypt, its crew accused Israel of disrupting its GPS trackers, showing the vessel was on land at Jordan's main airport. GPS scrambling or spoofing is a frequent tactic employed by Israel during its war in Gaza, and it was also used at the height of fighting between Israel and the Lebanese militant group Hezbollah last year. Even here in Jerusalem, in the ABC's bureau, occasionally our phones would say that we were at Amman International Airport, about 70 kilometres that way, or even in Beirut. Israeli media is reporting that the Israeli military plans to seize the Madeleine and arrest and deport its crew after taking the ship to the port of Ashdod, just north of Gaza. Last month, another ship chartered by the Freedom Flotilla was, according to the crew, attacked by drones off the coast of Malta, the group pointing the finger at Israel, which hasn't commented on the attack. Israeli authorities insist enough aid is being brought into Gaza, with another 350 trucks delivering supplies through the Kerem Shalom crossing last week. But humanitarian agencies insist it's too few deliveries to really make a difference after Israel's total blockade of Gaza ran for 11 weeks, a decision Israel said was necessary to try to pressure Hamas into releasing the remaining Israeli hostages still held captive in the Strip.
Meantime, Israel has confirmed its military killed a senior leader of the militant group Hamas inside Gaza after identifying his body. The Israeli army gave a small group of foreign reporters a tour of a tunnel beneath the European hospital in southern Gaza, where it says it retrieved Mohammed Sinwar's body following an airstrike last month. Mohammed Sinwar had assumed a senior role in the group after the death of his brother, Hamas leader Yahya Sinwar. Hamas hasn't commented on the Israeli claims. Hundreds of people have come together in the Queensland town of Gingin for a vigil for 17-year-old Phoebe Bishop, who police allege was murdered by her housemates. Will Murray joins me now from Brisbane with more on this. Will, can you tell us more about this gathering?
Well, good morning, Gemma. There was sort of incredibly emotional scenes in Gingin last night. As you mentioned, there was hundreds of people who turned out for this vigil in a small park. They were all wearing brightly coloured clothing, playing some of Phoebe's favourite music, laying flowers, putting down photos and sharing their thoughts and memories of this much-loved 17-year-old. A number of people addressed the crowd who gathered there, including Phoebe's sister Kaylee and as well as her mother Kylie Johnson. Kylie spoke of her magical and free-spirited daughter and also showed a moment of incredible grace in awful circumstances by asking the community of Gingin and the broader community to have some empathy and show respect to the families of those accused of murdering Phoebe. Now, this was a very emotional time and it was a great opportunity for that very small community to come together and to share some of that grief. And I think because of that success, there may be further gatherings planned in the coming days.
Will, what's happening with the police investigation?
Well, for those who might not have been following along closely, Phoebe was first reported missing back on May the 15th after failing to board a flight from nearby Bundaberg to Western Australia. Now, since that time, police, the family and the community have been desperately searching for answers. And police have regularly been searching bushland area and also the property at which Phoebe lived before she went missing. But there was a number of weeks there between when she was first reported missing and when we finally started to get some answers from police. Now, last week, Phoebe's housemates, James Wood and Tanika Bromley, were charged with her murder. And thanks to some phone tracking, according to police, they then conducted a search of the Goodnight Scrub National Park, which is quite nearby Gingin, and they located human remains. Now, those remains are yet to be formally identified as belonging to Phoebe, Gemma, but we understand that that is likely and that will come in the coming days. Now, as for those accused of her murder, Mr Wood and Ms Bromley, they're likely to face court in August.
Will Murray reporting from Brisbane, thank you. Northern Territory Police are investigating the death in custody of an Aboriginal man at Royal Darwin Hospital over the weekend. For more, reporter Melissa McKay joins us now. Mel, what do we know about this man?
Good morning, Gemma. Well, details about this incident are fairly thin for the moment, but we do know that this 68-year-old man was from a remote community in the Northern Territory's top end. He was taken into what's called protective custody by AFP officers at the Darwin airport on the 30th of May. They say that he was allegedly too drunk to board a flight and he was taken into custody by those police officers who took him to the Palmerston Watch House before deciding he needed medical attention. He was taken to the Royal Darwin Hospital and it's on arrival at RDH that police say he had a sudden and serious medical episode and has been in intensive care at Royal Darwin Hospital since then. The 68-year-old man passed away over the weekend on Saturday after spending that time in intensive care. Police say that his next of kin have been notified and that the Northern Territory Police are conducting an investigation on behalf of the coroner because this man was in custody when he first lost consciousness. All deaths in custody here in the Northern Territory are subject to a coronial inquest, and so the Northern Territory coroner will be taking a look at this incident as well.
Mel, this is the second death in custody in the Northern Territory in the past couple of weeks. We've had rallies over the weekend and more are planned this week.
Yeah, that's right, Gemma. We saw dozens of people gathering late yesterday in Perth at a vigil held in honour of Kumanjai White. This is a 24-year-old Warlpiri man who died during an attempted arrest here in Alice Springs at the end of last month by two off-duty police officers at the local Coles supermarket. Kumanjai White has been remembered at these vigils as a happy and much-loved young man, a dearly missed member of the Yundamu community. These rallies and vigils, as we've said, have been held around the country over the last week as part of what's being called a National Week of Action, and the calls from his family and community reverberating across the country at these rallies, calling for an independent investigation into his death. We heard from Kumanjai White's grandfather, Ned Jumpinjimpa Hargraves, this morning. He spoke to News Breakfast. We can take a listen to what he had to say.
We want you to drop the guns. Drop it. Because if you don't, and the way you are talking and way you are asking us, the community, to say sorry, that is not good enough.
So a real sense of mistrust between communities and Northern Territory Police. We're hearing there from Ned Hargraves. These rallies will continue throughout the week. Gemma, we're expecting to see another gathering in Adelaide next weekend. And of course, another vigil here in Alice Springs is expected on Wednesday morning, when members of Kumanjai White's family are expected to travel from Yundamu here to Alice Springs.
Melissa McKay there in Alice Springs. Thank you. Former fighters have exposed the brutal reality of fighting in the UFC. They say they're being pushed to their physical and financial limits, while the UFC takes in more than $1 billion in revenue. Well, in this week's Four Corners, reporter Mahmoud Fazal speaks to former fighters who describe a culture of exploitation, secrecy and lasting damage.
Bec Rawlings has been one of the trailblazers for Australian female fighters. She started training as a teenager and fought her way into a women's mixed martial arts promotion called Invicta. Her goal was always to sign with the UFC, and in 2014, her big break arrived.
And I got the phone call and it was Dana White. And I answered and I knew his voice straight away, and he's like, "We've signed you to the UFC, you're going to be a part of the Ultimate Fighter." I don't care if I get knocked out or choked unconscious. I'm not scared of the outcome. My biggest fear is not going out there and putting on a show. Knowing what I'm capable of and not doing it. That's my biggest fear going into a fight. It's never if I'm going to get hurt or if I lose. It's always wanting to go out there and show people what I'm capable of.
UFC fighters are signed up as independent contractors, which means they get paid when the company gives them a fight.
It was paycheck to paycheck. Look, I wasn't making much money, but it was worth it. I had a goal and I had, a dream that I was chasing, and I sacrificed a lot. My family sacrificed a lot to chase those dreams.
The Four Corners reporter Mahmoud Fazal joins me now. Mahmoud, thank you. Now, what prompted this investigation?
So we were looking at the kind of evolution and scale of the UFC, particularly its impact in Australia. And eventually we decided to examine the business and the corporation behind it. The sport's incredibly popular here in Australia. The fighters risk their lives for the sport, and so we wanted to see the kind of scaffolding behind this organisation.
And tell us a bit more about that level of popularity that it has reached, and to what extent Australia has embraced that.
So in Australia, some of the highest grossing ticketed events in Australia have been UFC events in the past. Huge fan base here, and we've had champions like Alex Volkanovski and Robert Whittaker fighting in the top 10 of the sport. So there's a real growing base in Australia. We're a big market for the UFC. that's why we wanted to look into what the kind of organisation represents.
And you looked at the business model. I mean, how is the revenue raised and who profits from this?
So this is $1 billion business that really markets itself as the pinnacle of mixed martial arts in the whole world. For mixed martial arts athletes, there's nowhere else to go really. It consumes the majority of the market share. When the more we looked into it, we realised that this organisation was operating somewhat like a monopoly and acquiring athletes through very restrictive contracts that didn't give them many options, which led to a class action in which fighters are trying to fight and fight for some of their pay and their rights.
So from what you saw, I mean, would you say that these fighters are underpaid?
Well, from what we've seen is that the majority of the fighters who sign these contracts will receive something like $10,000 to show up and $10,000 if they win. There are fighters who make really large sums of money and really significant sums of money, but they're a fraction of the workforce in the UFC, which has, a fight roster in the hundreds. The Australian athletes that are in the UFC that we spoke to said, when they signed up, they were offered $10,000 to fight and $10,000 if they win, and they were lucky to get a fight a year. So if you add to that the expenses, paying for training, paying for your coaches, paying your managers, paying travel, there's almost nothing left at the end of it. So it's very hard to have a sustainable career when that's the entry.
And what do we know of what they're paying long term in terms of the cost of their health?
So we know that repeated blows to the head, repeated head trauma leads to long-term effects later in life. Namely CTE, it can bring on early dementia and so on. So there are lasting health consequences of this sport, not just financial ones. And, the UFC doesn't really provide any long-term health care for these fighters who've given so much to build the brand into what it is today.
Mahmoud Fazal, thank you.
Thanks.
And you can watch the full story tonight on Four Corners on ABC and ABC iView. The MCG will host the 11th Big Freeze this afternoon, with sporting greats Mark Taylor, Liz Watson and Peter Dacos among those taking the icy plunge. The annual event was started by AFL legend and 2025 Australian of the Year Neil Daniher to raise funds for research into motor neuron disease. The theme this